Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on the topic of thriving through uncertainty. I'm Megan Marshall. I'm a managing partner at AIIR Consulting, and so glad to be here with you today. In my work, I have, whether it's coaching leaders, whether it's supporting the client organizations we serve, this constant theme keeps coming up where I just see that people are really tired. We talked about VUCA. Then it was the pandemic. And now I think we're in this environment where it just feels like we don't know what's going to happen. Things feel really uncertain. And what I see, and I'm guilty of this as well, is this desire to want to cave in and curl up in a ball and just hope that the change or whatever is about to happen will stop or it will go away, and then we can kind of come out of hiding. And that's really this instinct. And I think overall, we're just kind of fatigued from the change. And so really today, what we're here to talk about is what about if we change how we look at it? What about if change or uncertainty isn't the enemy? And what about instead of, kind of caving in or protecting ourselves, we open up and are able to lean into the change? What about if the way we lead through change, whether it's the mindset we bring, the stability we offer, the story we create, is what actually gives us a competitive advantage? And that's why we're here today, to really explore how leaders can not just survive uncertainty, but truly thrive in it. And that's really the heart of what we do at AIIR. We exist to help leaders navigate change and shape a better future. And we really believe that leadership is the constant needed in times of change. Really, in order for organizations to unlock performance, to outperform, leadership is absolutely imperative. And at AIIR, we're fortunate to support leaders across industries, particularly in the pharmaceutical space, from early stage to global organizations. And I'm really excited today to have a leader in pharma joining us here today. And we'll be talking about kind of our experiences here, but really this is applicable across industries. And so thrilled to be joined today by Keith Reisinger. Keith has spent actually 26 years at Eli Lilly, which
That's right.
seems hard to believe, Keith. And he's currently the Executive Director of Leadership Development, and he's a true expert in cross-functional leadership and teaming. And so, Keith, would love to have you introduce yourself. Also, as we're getting started here on this topic, feel free to put your questions in the chat. We might be able to answer a few along the way, and then we might have some time at the end as well for Q&A. But Keith, would love to turn it over to you to have you introduce yourself and get us started talking about this idea of change and really how we need to think about change differently, or what's the mindset that we need when approaching change.
All right, Megan, thank you for that. And yeah, a little bit about me. I think I need to handle probably the biggest question right now, which is that a chalkboard behind you? Yes, it is, but I need to put the disclaimer out there. It's not a chalkboard because I refuse to adopt technology. I love technology. But when it comes to doing this kind of thing, this is the most reliable writing tool you have, and allows us to freelance a little bit, that we can kind of work the board versus putting in front of you a preset set of slides. But yes, as Megan mentioned, I worked for Eli Lilly. I've been able to do that for 26 years now. I spent about half my Lilly life in the commercial organization in the business components, and then the other half in this leader development space. And that's had a few versions of it along the way, but I'm pretty fortunate now on a couple of fronts. One, I work with probably who will go down as one of the most outstanding CEOs of our time. So that's pretty amazing for me. But also every single day I sit between researchers and practitioners, just trying to bring together the coaching necessary to help teams of leaders perform better. So that's how I get to spend my days and my time. And as a result, try to bring a few things forward. As Megan mentioned, the tiredness that comes with uncertainty and with change. Some of that's real, but a lot of it is how we perceive it, and a lot of it is, this is not just a pure mindset thing. There's techniques behind it, but a lot of it is how do we receive the world? Because Megan, like you said, it's a reality, but it doesn't have to wear us down. It really sets the stage, and as the title of this webinar is, it sets the stage to really become a competitive edge. something that if you handle it the right way, actually makes you more effective, because everybody's experiencing some of that chaos, some of that change all at the same time. And so how do you be more effective through it? Sound good? We'll jump in.
Sounds ready to dive in.
3 components we'll hit on, and Megan teased them. You didn't probably know that because you don't know the content we're going to hit on here yet, but 3 tools, I'll say tools, 3 kind of approaches on this topic. So in case you doze off, in case you decide to step out or whatever, here's the 3 things we're going to hit on. The mindset around this topic of change for just a few minutes. We're going to hit on this idea of wiggle, don't wobble, which is how do you create stability for people? Because sometimes by starting with what doesn't change can actually be a really effective tool. And then the third piece that I've found makes a huge difference in being effective through these things is it's actually the stories we tell ourselves and the stories we create and the narratives we create throughout our organization. So mindset, create stability, and narrative story. That's the 3 pieces that we'll hit. And just a reminder, make that chat active. Megan will be watching that and we'll bring some of that in. In my setup, I'll go probably off screen for a second as I write here, just off the edge of the frame. But I want to get us started in this topic on the mindset piece. And to fill in the blank here, the essence of this particular topic is turning hard into how. This is a conversation piece, and the conversation often starts with this: change is what, Megan? What do we tend to say?
Change is hard. Change is painful.
Change is hard, right? And so we tend to think that's just what it is. So just get better at it. And that's true. But if you want to be effective, you want to take the mindset in a different place, and you don't say, yeah, change is hard, suck it up. That doesn't help anybody, right? So it's not a mindset like that. It's let this become the beginning of a sentence. I just like to put 3 little dots, finish the sentence. Change is hard for the unprepared. What is it we need to be prepared for that we haven't been? Or change is hard for the unwilling. What are we unwilling to let go of because we're so confident in it or believe in it so deeply that it might be holding us back? Change is hard for a period of time. So how do we make this transition shorter and more effective to do the new thing better, faster? And I could go on and on with these, Megan, of filling in the blank. The idea is change is hard for blank, fill it in. But then the key is turn that into a conversation. So how do we? So how can we? So what would it take? That becomes a productive conversation to be able to have around this one and the mindset.
Keith, curious your perspective on why do we often get stuck? Like how it's almost maybe even a bit, I don't even know, victim mentality might be too strong, but sometimes it almost feels like we can get in a rut. And so that the how, it's almost like there's a blocker to getting there. And so just curious, kind of that turn, I feel like is really, really important. And how do we turn ourselves and how do we help lead others effectively here?
Yeah, I think the couple things that I've found on that, I want to call out Susan's comment, change is hard. I can do hard things. Love that. That's an identity Susan's talking about. Like, that doesn't say change is hard, I wish it would go away. Change is hard. I've done hard things. I can do hard things. Let's do the hard thing. That identity matters a lot too. So love that you put that in. But to your question, Megan, like, why do people get stuck? How do you get unstuck? 2 things I find often. People are looking for certainty, but there's very little of that to go around. So from a leadership perspective, always coach, you can create clarity, but you can't create certainty. So you get unstuck by and even if clarity changes in a 24-hour cycle, like let's say that's the pace at which your environment is changing, that seeking clarity is super important. The other one, and actually I have it here in the blank, so I'm gonna fill in the blank on it real quick. And I'm not saying this is the most dominant thing that gets people stuck, but I think you'll see the relationship in it. So I have over the years this whole list of things that are not equal, right? I have another one over here we're going to hit on later. But it's the frame behind this is we start to solve for something. We're actually solving for the wrong thing. You have to solve for the right thing. What's related to this one is safe is not equal to comfortable. And you should, from a leadership perspective or a peer perspective, you should always create a safe environment. for people to say, I don't get it. I don't know how. Like, create that safe environment. It is not your job to create a comfortable environment. So I think oftentimes we get stuck, or I've found oftentimes we get stuck because even if we don't say it in these words, we like the comfort zone. We like our capability of the current way of doing things is comfortable. Now I got to get uncomfortable. Never compromising safe. I got to get uncomfortable. The other factor in this one, and this is going to probably land different for different people. There is a drama researcher out there named Cy Wakeman who's done incredible work on the topic of just like wasteful activity in the workplace. She calls it drama. And one of those wasteful activities is called collusion, where I don't like something and I'm going to get you to not like it with me because I'm going to talk negative about it. So socializing doubt of the new thing becomes another way we get stuck. So the pursuit of certainty when all you can get is clarity, the desire to be comfortable when really safety is all you really require, and the avoiding the collusion and the socializing doubt, those are factors that keep people stuck and that you have to overcome to get unstuck.
Yeah, that's really helpful. AIR recently, just this week maybe, or last week, came out with a new white paper on leadership's critical role in cross-functional pharma teams, but it really has implications across industries and these 6 core leadership responsibilities. And one of them is really this idea of driving collective understanding. And I think we'll talk about that more when we talk more about kind of communication and narrative, but what is the role of a leader and maybe spotting those times when collusion is happening and redirecting it?
Yeah, the role of leader, obviously, it can be hard because sometimes you're shielded from that. I've had many leaders who got promoted to very executive levels and are like, my jokes got funnier overnight, which is people aren't truth telling as much anymore, right? Even coming from a military background a little bit, like there's this, you're trained that authority kind of rules, and so you have to overcome some of those things. But what you're hitting on, another solve that I found happens over and over again, understand is not equal to agree. I want you to agree to the new thing, but even if I can't get you to agree to it, I need you to understand, and we're going to move in that direction. And so you can spend a lot of time trying to solve for agreement, and you're just not going to. Some people are, until you prove that the new thing is the better way, they're not going to do it. But you can create an understanding. Here's why we have to move in that direction. So in your white paper you referenced, which I've read, I think it kind of peels back on some of those things as well. But that's been a huge factor.
Absolutely. And, talking here about the role of a leader, I think that kind of ties into this next point here around stability and like how leaders really create stability. Wondering if you want to dive in more there.
Yeah, for sure. And there's a little bit of vocabulary in this one, and I don't want it to be like vocabulary is so basic, but I can tell you, like putting the meaning to the words you use, whatever version of the word you use, put meaning to the words you use makes a big difference. So this component here is the idea of start with what doesn't change. Like even when, if you're for me in a pharmaceutical company business, making medicines to try to treat disease, a pandemic happened. People with diabetes still need their medicine. That doesn't change, right? And so and sometimes the thing that doesn't change is tiny. Sometimes it's huge. But the idea here, I've got a little circle here, and oftentimes in room settings, I'll have people stare at that circle. Like I'm going to stand here looking back the other way. I'm going to look straight into my camera, and I say, just stand there. Everything's steady. Now pick up one leg. I'm standing on one leg, and guess what? There's a little bit of wobble. I'm sorry, a little bit of wiggle below the knee on my leg, but I'm keeping myself steady, right? Now I close my eyes and I can start to kind of do that. My wiggle became a wobble, and it became a wobble because I lost sight of my point of reference, right? We've seen this, we've seen this happen. The idea here is in order to wiggle but not wobble, you need agility, and we promote that all the time. We got to be more agile as a workforce, or we got to be more agile as a sales team, whatever it might be. But agility needs stability. There's a bit of a paradoxical nature. It's hard, by the way, to write and spell things correctly on the board.
If you get something wrong, it'll be okay. We'll give you grace.
Sometimes I just start writing sloppy. So you need stability in order to have agility. These things, we say them like they just belong together, like speed and agility belong together. Those are actually opposite things. And these are too. Stability is very different than agility, but stability enables that agility. And the frame for this one, there is always a dot you can define. That dot may be the size of the end of my little piece of chalk. That dot of what stays the same may be massive, but there's always something that you can anchor on. Now I've got my focal point, and then we build around this with a little model that I like to use. It looks like this. We put our dot there at the top. That's our kind of common purpose, if you will, what we're all aiming to achieve. Maybe it's just at an enterprise or company level. Maybe it's a team level. It doesn't matter. But the question in this one to create stability is, why do we exist in the structure we're in? Whether it's a team or a company, why? It's just a huge why question, right? And you can center around that. Focus on purpose. That I find that most people have done a version of that. I also find that most are copy and pasting organizational level why. And while it holds true through an organization, the approximation of why you exist. I exist at Lilly to help leaders and teams perform their best. Lilly exists to make medicines that make life better for people. I'm attached to that, but I've approximated my dot on what I need to do. And that creates stability, and it doesn't matter what happens. That's what I'm here to do. There's a second question that helps create stability, and that is how. How do you win at your why? It's a strategy question, but it's an enduring strategy question. It's not like I can have a long horizon strategy to live a healthy life, but I can have a short-term strategy of how to eat a healthy lunch, right? This is that healthy life. As long as this is your why remains the same, how you win at your why is, say, think about Amazon. Amazon exists, well, my version of why Amazon exists is to get me to buy a lot more things I actually need, okay? And maybe that's yours, maybe it's not. How do they do that? They attract a lot of sellers that attracts a lot of buyers. They have a distribution channel and an analytics system that just kind of fuels how they win at getting me to buy more stuff that I need or make me happy, if we were putting it in their terms. But almost no teams I start out working with have a good, clear answer to that. This is a unifying question. If you're a team of teams and there's 5 teams that make up an overall why you're at work, then each of those teams should be interconnected at how you win. In an organization, it takes recruiting top talent, but it also takes developing that talent, positioning that talent. Everybody's got to work together. So this creates the stability. So we just move our paradox over here. And then we start to get into a bridge phase here, which are objectives. So I mentioned vocabulary. And again, you may have different words you use for this, but objectives by definition, outcomes with endpoints. So what are the outcomes you have to get to by when, which is different than priorities, which are my focused efforts now. So I've got to get to an outcome, but I need a focused effort now. I can't do everything all at the same time. And that gets us down to the tasks that we spend our calendar type of thing doing. And this is all agility. So this is how that works, is you've defined that at the top, but now as you distribute work through your workforce, you've got these layers of things. You've defined how we win. You've set targets to achieve in a timeline. You've then empowered people to go and allocate and spend their time where it makes sense, and then the task. You mentioned tired and things like that. This is where we experience tired oftentimes, and this is where we often experience confusion, especially in those cross-functional teams. And so we try to solve there, but a lot of times the solves are up here in stability. Create stability that enables agility. That allows you to wiggle, not wobble.
I wondered about that with one that's really helpful for leaders that are on, let's say they've got their kind of team that they're on, but then they also are part of a cross-functional group. How do they almost need to go through this exercise for both of the teams, or both of the whatever they're a part of, because each of those teams needs to really have their why and start with their purpose.
Yes, this is it can be a pretty labor intensive thing to go through, especially in this context, and almost all are cross functional. I'm going to use terminology team of teams. General McChrystal writes a great book, Team of Teams, followed up with a sequel called One Mission that kind of gets into, with this chief of staff, it gets into an operational plan for that. But ultimately what it comes down to is a lot of those teams have shared priorities and shared objectives and outcomes, but some are not shared. So then how do you, when you get into budget allocation and people allocation and all the things necessary to be effective in something like that? So where I see it happen most often, and you may have different terminology or structure around this, where I see this one happen most often is when you've got central capability types of things, but decentralized execution of those things. So like an HR organization is a central capability, but then you've got business units or verticals stood up that are all kind of feeding out of that same, a neuroscience business unit in a pharmaceutical company doesn't stand up its own HR organization. It's building out of the organizational one, but it's got its approximated HR folks that are in it. So creating a shared understanding of this, a robust example would be, each person being able to create this and then looking across the room. And I've had situations where there was 11 teams that made up one team, right? This one team's job was to conduct clinical trials. But you can imagine, to conduct clinical trials, there's a lot of different teams required to do that. And so we were in a big room one time and everybody put their 11 kind of versions of this that were out there. And then you start to look for synergy. You start to look for duplication of effort. You start to identify gaps. Who's doing this? Oh, didn't know. I thought you were doing that. So now you create that visibility of what each other are there to do. And I had a situation one time, Megan, where one of the teams had made a commitment to the unit they support, but it relied on another team delivering in a major platform purchase that needed to happen in the IT function. Well, they deprioritized that purchase because it was going to be so expensive, but they didn't tell the person over here supporting the business unit. And so if we hadn't been going through that exercise, then they put months of effort into something they can never deliver on. So you do have to create, but you benefit greatly in matrix organizations, which most are. You benefit greatly from attach your own language to it, but a structure of why are we here together, structured the way we are, where do we have autonomy, and where do we have this kind of unity that we need to focus on matters a lot. You get into localized cultures, you get into a lot of variability, but the work to get done is where you focus that time.
Yeah, I think that kind of the ecosystem and everyone that the team is working with and visibility and communication are so important. It's been interesting. I've been recently looking at what leaders are focused on in their executive coaching engagements. AIIR has a leadership framework where we have 45 leadership skills, and each development plan goal is tagged with these leadership skills. And the big thing I've noticed so far for 2025 is the rise in leaders working specifically on stakeholder management. It went from ranked 15th to ranked number 7 or number 6, which is the largest jump I've seen in some time. And I think, in this environment of uncertainty, it seems like there's a lot more eyes on things, but just that need for the team to know kind of what stays constant, what's changing, and who do they need to communicate with in order to be effective as a team.
Yeah. In General McChrystal's work that I mentioned on the Team of Teams, he kind of looked back at his turnaround situation, and I won't go into the depth of it. People who are interested can go jump into that. But he looked back at his effectiveness turning a situation around and wrote the book on how to do it. But the first kind of concept he talks about was alignment around a common purpose. You ask anybody on the team, Why are we structured in this? You need to get a really good similar answer across teams. But the second one became shared consciousness. That's his terminology on it, which is how do you move information vertically and laterally through organizations? Because network organizations do it well, startups, because everybody's in the garage together. But as soon as you're in a high rise or a building or whatever, or you're distributed across the globe, now you don't have that physical proximity. So how do you make sure you're moving the right information? I've used the analogy, I think when you and I were talking, I'm having a recent experience building a house. If in the framing phase of putting up the walls of a house, you decide to move one, it's not enough to just tell the framing carpenter that you're moving that wall, because about 3 or 4 months from now, electricians and plumbers and others are coming in. They thought the wall was there, and now it's over there. This communication becomes key. But Megan, one thing, and this is one of those ones that's probably people are gonna may dismiss anything I have to say from here on out. I understand that, or it may resonate with you. This is one that I find is most effective with strong command of a leader. If you huddle a team up in a room and you say to that team, hey, let's get everybody's point of view and voice on why we are a team. You can spend days just pontificating words. And sometimes there's value in that because you need to see where are we starting from. But oftentimes, the leader having the command to say, here's why we've been structured the way we are as a team. Here's the cross-functional necessities for us to be successful as a team. Starting with now, I'll let you react to it. We can iterate on that. But to start with a blank slate, team, why do we exist the way we do? And how do we think we should win at that? It feels like the right thing because you're involving the team in the build of something. But I find again and again and again, you will burn hours upon hours upon hours trying to agree on words. When if you just take some command from a leader perspective or coach that leader to take some command as a starting point, say, let's react to it, much more effective. Lots of autonomy down here.
Mm-hmm.
The
Yep.
leader benefits greatly from taking command on creating stability.
Yeah,
And that's just
absolutely.
been my experience over and over. Big organizations, large organizations, it repeats itself every time.
It ties back to, I think, that understanding doesn't equal agreement in terms of what's the role of a leader. And there is that opportunity for people to react and to understand people's perspective, but that doesn't mean that everyone's going to agree. And what does strong leadership look like there? And I think a lot of that has to do with communication. And Keith, something in our past conversation that I've been reflecting on is, what is it? It's not what you communicate, it's what gets repeated. And I know that's kind of your next big point that I want to make sure we have time.
Yeah. So when we've addressed mindset, we've turned kind of responses of changes hard into conversations of how do we solve hard things? How do we do hard things? You get some wins. And then like Susan mentioned, you're now an identity of that. You've done the operational work, right? To create stability, to cascade effort through a workforce that has agility. You're wiggling, but you're not wobbling. The piece on here is I often ask people, how often does your day play out how you planned it? And it's almost never. So that's wiggle, but don't wobble. But then this piece is now what's the socialization around these things? And sometimes it's planned socialization. I have a town hall. I need to get up. I need to make sure, everybody's hearing the same thing at the same time. But usually it's the chatter. The chatter in an organization will either drive you forward in the direction you want to go and build the mindset you need, or it will stall you out. And sure, there's a spectrum and a range there that you're somewhere on. But the idea behind this one, it's not what you say. So I love to start this one this way with groups a lot of times. It's not what you say and then finish the statement. So Megan, what comes to mind for you?
It's not what you say, it's how you say it.
It's not what you say, it's how you say it. And there's a lot of truth in that. It's not how you say, it's not what you say, it's who you say it to. It's when you say it. There's all kinds of versions that are useful. What I find in this one, it's not what you say, it's what people repeat. That's a lot harder to solve for than you would think. Because what you've got to be able to do is stop narrative drift. Someone can say something. I had a leader recently say, I swear I can get up and say, I got a dog. And people are going to say 2 weeks later, I got a cat. And it's just the nature of people hear different things. People run it through different filters, right, of their experiences. You can say something like, guys, we got to get better at this because the external environment's saying it. Somebody's going to hear you say, you're never happy with our effort. And now I'm going to go back and I'm going to collude with other people like Cy Waitman was talked about and get you to agree with me that what so-and-so said is you don't like what we're doing. That was never said. What was said was we got to get better, right? So you have to fix that. My not equal here is communication. Is not equal to narrative. By definition, communication is the transmission of information, and you should transmit information effectively. Not too much, but effectively. Narrative is the replayed translations. So your job from a leader coach perspective is how do you make sure you close the gap between what gets communicated and what gets repeated? And that's a huge driver. And this is, in Cy's research, what she found was 2 hours a day is spent doing unvaluable things. This socializing doubt, the things that I don't understand or I don't know or whatever. And all that builds into unproductive narrative. Axios did research last year that said 55% of employees are spending 2 hours a day trying to find information they need to do their work. Now, this is a communication effectiveness piece. You need to do that, but you also have to put it into the proper narrative form. So you got to close that gap. One of the biggest tips I found, especially in the town hall type setting when I'm coaching a leader on what they're going to communicate to their workforce, if you're going to say something that's a little punchy at all, include what you're not saying. So in my example earlier, I might say, team, workforce, it's time for us to get better at what we do. If I stop there, now I've got half the people are like, yeah, let's get better. And the other half are like, why does he hate what we're doing? But if I go on and I say, we got to get better at what we're doing, I'm not saying we're not good. In fact, I think we're the best we've ever been. What I am saying is where things are going next, we've got to outpace that. And with that, I want to share with you our plan to upskill the workforce and engage with stakeholder management or whatever the skill piece is. But I just closed the narrative drift. I closed some of it. There's always going to be some, because there tends to be a few people who seem to exist at work to create narrative drift, to create things that just aren't productive. They're few and far between, but they're there. And it will hold you back. So even when you've done this work, you've done the operational work, you don't nail the narrative, it's just not going to be as productive as it could be.
What's coming up for me in this entire conversation is the need for intentionality. Like, in order to create a narrative, you need to know what that narrative is. Or in order to drive a high-performing team, you really have to take that intentional time of thinking first through your purpose and why you exist. And so any wisdom you have, Keith, in terms of kind of if you're a leader hearing this, how do you get started?
Yeah, and maybe everybody's got their own structure for effective communication. Storytelling is super effective for doing this, and I won't take you into the depths of what I use to coach because it's not the topic and you might get bored with it, except there's two pieces that I'll call out. And these are two pieces well written on, not in this necessarily context, but Jim Collins writes on this, one of the probably best researchers of all time. Maybe I'm just a big fan, but I think many people who know Collins' work would find that to be true. But he has this thing called the Stockdale paradox, and it's just a paradox of a person who was a prisoner of war in a period of time. And the lesson from this Stockdale paradox is, on the one hand, you need to confront reality. On the other hand, you need to create winning faith. right? So it's this kind of reality of the situation we're in, good or bad, but then there's a pivot to faith in our future. And it's not that everything has a strong, hard pivot like that, but you'll find a lot of things do. Here's the importance of these two. If you ignore reality and it's just rah, rah, we've got a huge opportunity in front of us to take this product from this and this launch, whatever. Again, a portion of people just rally behind that, but there's a portion of people that you are out of touch with what it's going to take to get this launch. This is a cold chain supply, whatever. Like, you're out of touch if all I'm doing is talking about the faith in our ability to go do the next hard thing, right? Likewise, if I only focus on our reality, okay, the target is to double revenue over the next 6 months. I have no idea how we're going to do that. We know that we've got limited access. We know that our supply chain has been disrupted. We know all these realities. Well, now you're just creating victims, right? That all these external things happen and I can't do anything about it. So this becomes an important part of that one, Megan, as you're shaping narrative. Be robust in how you do that. Tune into the organization. Do skip levels necessary. Ask safe questions to people like, hey, if we were going to do this different, what do you think that thing should be? Right? And allow people to just voice up. You're not going to go ask the question, hey, what's the current narrative as you hear it? Like, they're just going to tell you what you want to hear. But if you ask the question, hey, what's working, what's not, ask those types of things, you'll start to find out what's on people's mind at indirect. But as you're communicating that, it's not about balance. It's not about, we have 3 things that are hard realities and 3 things that are winning faith. It's not that. Sometimes the deck is stacked in your favor or not, but the fact that you can name it gives a lot of credibility and trust building, and it closes that narrative gap quite a bit by doing that. So that's where I would orient a place to start: a clear definition of your reality, the tough stuff, and a clear explanation or pivot over to the winning faith necessary.
I love that. It's a really, really helpful framework, Keith. I know I've been asking a few questions and curious if anyone has any questions that they would like to ask. We've had some great comments coming in the chat, and just want to see if you do have a question, feel free to put it in the chat and send it over to us, and we'll address it.
Yeah, maybe go ahead, Megan, sorry.
One thing that I definitely want to make sure that we have time for and ask is if there's kind of one key takeaway that you would want someone to leave with from this webinar today or do differently, what would that be? What's kind of your one key takeaway?
Megan, I can't pin it down to one. There's 3. you have to turn hard into how. What a mindset to have, but it's not just do it. It's have the conversation. Turn hard into how. Wiggle, but don't wobble, and build the narrative that fuels you forward. So that's the 3. Now, if you said, Keith, you have to pick one of those 3. If I were to pick, it's hard. It'd be interesting to see if people would put it in chat. If you had to pick one of the 3, which one would you pick? I find that this one creates the most drag on leaders and will create the most propulsion forward when you get it right. So it may seem like the softest, if that's a word, of all of these, but somehow solving for this in the right way actually starts to influence this and probably improve your ability to be more operational. That's, if you forced me into picking one, focus on your narrative. Starts with communication, but focus on your narrative.
Oh, it's really helpful.
What would you pick? You've heard.
I think a key takeaway is, as a leader, I need time to reflect and really think about these things, think about my narrative, think about that, going from change is hard to the how. I, as kind of just like a processor and how I operate, I need that time to reflect and to really be strategic about my leadership. And so when looking at all of this, I think it's really helpful. And I think what would help me to really apply it is to take that time, carve it out, to be thoughtful here. And so you brought up that idea of a schedule. and how many times, I'll put in like strategic thinking block, and then how many times does it actually happen? And so what needs to change in order to really protect that time in order for me to be a more effective leader, specifically in these areas?
Yeah. It's a little bit, Megan, on this paradox. By the way, almost all leadership effectiveness is wrapped up in paradoxical realities. Zoom in, zoom out, right? The zoom out's time, but it's also purview. It's also that seeing the bigger system and how it operates that can matter. So you have to be intentional, and you have to be thoughtful about what is that, all these pieces. You have to be very thoughtful about. I did see Robin throw a question out about an example of a narrative. I'm going to give you, Robin, the very first one that comes to mind, and it's from the big screen. It's from the third greatest movie of all time. Of course, first was Top Gun and then Top Gun Maverick, but then there was the movie Ford versus Ferrari. People, some have seen it, some haven't. So without you having to have seen it, here's the situation. A thing went really bad in Ford trying to become a racing brand. Their first attempt went really bad. And the person behind the initiative was called up to the CEO's office, and the CEO asks the question. Literally, this was the question, and yes, I know it word for word. That probably says a lot. The question the CEO asked was, tell me why I shouldn't fire everyone associated with this abomination, starting with you. And Matt Damon, who's playing the person figure here, says, well, sir, we haven't figured out how to corner yet, and we hadn't figured out how to keep the car on the ground. And I mean, the brakes were the only thing that didn't break. Heck, we don't even know if we can keep our paint on the car for a full 24 hours in this race we're in, right? So here's 4 mentions of reality. And he pauses, because it's part of this communication effectiveness. He says, but on our last lap, we clocked 208 miles an hour down the Mulsanne Straight. And Mr. Enzo Ferrari's never seen anything that fast, right? So here was that pivot. But in our last lap, right? This is a 4-to-1. 4 things that were reality that say you're failing, and 1 thing that says we got something to build on. Again, I'm not saying it's always that way. Sometimes maybe you have a lot more faith than you have, but you also have to not let hubris take over too. But that would be, Robin, the first example that comes to mind for me. But I've had a lot of commercial examples where we've never done this before. There's competitive organizations who are moving faster than us, but we know, and you start to get into the very specific things that you know you can build on. So that would be my top of mind example. And if you haven't seen Ford versus Ferrari or the Top Gun movies,
Yeah, watch movie recommendations of the day. What I hear there is just this sense of like, yes, let's do it. Let's be a team. Let's be unified. Let's like go run through a wall. Just this excitement, because there is that acknowledgement of their reality, but then there's the faith piece too. I think that's a fantastic example there. Maybe we have time for just one more question.
I see the one about getting on board, Megan. I don't know if that's okay. I think I was actually coaching a leader last week. They were delivering a message to a pretty big audience. And we talked about this, and we'll go back to the big screen, maybe the 20th movie of all time, Ice Age. And a big thing was changing, and some people were maybe not really excited about it, but they were going to go. And there was a group that's never going to go. And there was a big group in the middle just watching, which group do I join? And that's our reality in these types of things. What I would say to that is the Heath brothers have a quote that what looks like resistance is often a lack of clarity. So my first step would be create clarity. Again, not certainty. Wherever I had that up here. Clarity, I didn't put that one up there. Clarity is not equal to certainty. I spoke to it. So that would be one, create clarity. But I'll also say, and I've found this happen multiple times, and I have like data proof behind this one. If people are not willing to go, you got to deal with those people. It's change the people or change the people type of thing. And that's not like this tough-edged, hard-nosed message. It's just, if you're not willing to get on board with the program and where we're going next, then I want to help you find where you can go be great. But this is not going to be it. This is back to Cy Wakeman's work. And she says, when people complain about the thing you need to do next to other people, they don't do it in the mirror. I don't just contain that to me. I get other people on board with that. So dealing with the ones who just are unwilling to go where you got to go next is a factor. First, create clarity, because resistance is often a lack of clarity. It's not trying to get agreement, but trying to get understanding. Then, if they're not willing to get there, you've just got to deal with moving those people to whatever they can be great at next.
Yeah, makes sense. Keith, as we're kind of coming up on ending our time, any final words you'd like to share?
Yeah, I jotted one down earlier based off of your open. I had a program not long ago, or had an opportunity to interact with a gentleman named Sunil Gupta. Maybe some of you have heard of him, maybe you haven't. But Sunil, he talked about being tired. And I think there is a reality that a lot of people are tired. There's the mantra that a lot live by that say, you know, I'll rest when I die. That's not a good strategy. But Sunil says rest is a resource, not a reward. We tend to think it as I'll reward myself with rest after I've gotten this super hard thing done. Don't think of it that way. Rest is your resource to be more effective. So maybe underpinning everything on this is, if you're tired, there's probably additional resistance you're working against, and you can operationalize that out. You can change mindset, and you can clean up the narrative. Get good rest. Start there. So it's not related directly to our topic, but I think in this managing uncertainty and chaos, rest is a resource, not a reward, would be my parting thought.
Yeah, no, I think that's fantastic. And I think that's so true. We need a little bit of that, like you need to put on your own oxygen mask before helping someone else. But I think this idea that taking care of ourselves can lead to more energy, which is going to lead to better performance. It's not a reward. It's actually like a life source that will help me to lead well in these areas that we talked about today.